You can do all these different kinds of rakes if you want to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, David Gilmour, Santana, John Mayer, Jimi Hendrix, B.B. King, Keith Richards. You can rake up. You can rake up to a bend. You can rake up to a bend and connect it to scale. You could rake down. You could rake down on an arpeggio. You could rake up on an arpeggio. But how do we do it? How do we physically do it? And what notes do we rake to? Let's find out. First, let's just look at a simple down rake. So if we take a note, let's say we're in D minor pentatonic. And I don't know, let's take a D. That makes sense, right? We're going to take a root, which, by the way, is a very good choice to make. If you're going to rake to just one note, a root is going to be a very good choice because then you can just let it ring. But how am I doing that rake sound? The rake itself is just, it's nothing, right? It's just a bunch of percussive sounds that I'm doing by using my first and second finger to lay across the strings without pushing them down, while my third finger is pushing down the note that I end up wanting to ring. So you see that the ending note has to be, of course, higher than these guys. So we can do it kind of slow and more dramatic, or it can be really quick. Give it some vibrato afterwards. You can hear it against the chord, because this is the root, right? Now, I could also bend, as we said, right? So we could take any of these cool notes where we got, that's in D minor pentatonic. That's all I'm doing, is I'm just choosing a note from the scale, in this case, D minor pentatonic in shape 4 funny B string shape. Now, how do I get that rake with the bend? It's really the same thing, but actually I guess I notice here that I'm using only my first finger to get the rake, the scratch, because I want 2 fingers in this case to have the strength of getting the bend up. And actually I notice now that I do it, that my first finger comes in afterwards too for the extra strength. It probably doesn't need to, that might be just cool, that might just be habit, right? Okay, so we've got a rake up. We've got to rake up to a bend. Now, that's one thing. That's a pretty good lick in itself, but we need to connect the ideas. So we got to visualize the pentatonic shape there. We said, in this case, D minor pentatonic. That's just D minor pentatonic shape there. I can play anything afterwards. I do the rake, maybe a bend, and then anything else afterwards. Always try to connect ideas. Once you learn something new, connect it to other things that you know. In this case, you could call it a lick, but it's really an expressive technique, right? It's like adding vibrato, or it's like using dynamics or accents. I could just play the note by itself. Okay, it's pretty nice. It's a nice note. But that is so much more expressive and interesting to have that percussive sound behind it. Right? We could take any notes of that D minor pentatonic. The higher ones are easier, right? And we could do a rake on them. Now that sounds a bit goofy. I don't know that I would do that in a solo, but just to give you the idea of that's where the notes are coming from. Just imagine, say, maybe D minor pentatonic here. And there's a good way to end a lick as well, right? So that's the rake to the bend. In this case, that's bending to the root, the pitch of the root. So that's also going to sound good. Basically, any chord tone is going to sound good when you want to resolve the lick. When you want to just move on right afterwards, it doesn't really matter because you're not hanging out there anyway. Okay, so we've got the rake up. We've got the rake up to a bend. We've got the rake up to a bend and connected to scale. Now, we can also rake down. It's a little trickier. And of course, if you're going to rake downwards, you would want to choose a note that's lower down here to make it easier, right? Now, you can rake and land on your first finger, but it's almost always easier to use your third finger for the landing and use your first and second finger to block whatever else you need, right? But you can see it's definitely doable there with my first finger. But it sure is easier to have the ending note be the highest one. That way these guys provide the rake sound. So that's a downwards rake. That's on any of these. It's not, this is getting high. It's the second string. Can I do a downward rake from the second string? I can, but I only get, still it's kind of cool. It's possible, right? But generally, with a downwards rake, you're going to be choosing a string that's more this way. It does make sense. That's a nice way to end a lick. You could be playing whatever, D minor pentatonic. Just makes it a little more dramatic. It's more expressive. Now, if you are finding these videos useful, hit that like for me and subscribe because it helps other people to find them too. Now let's take it to the next level because this is getting to be a more of a Santana or David Gilmour level. With the Stevie Ray Vaughan type, it's usually with the scratch, so there's no particular notes there, right? It's just X's as we would indicate that on tablature. And that means that you don't have to be that careful about what notes you're blocking here. But what if we wanted to use a specific chord to arpeggiate, whatever that chord happens to be at that moment? We can rake that specific chord or arpeggio. In its simplest form, we could literally just take a D minor bar chord and rake that, right? Or a piece of it. And maybe then connect it to the scale. That is what we get in, for example, Comfortably Numb, right? We have, I don't know if I'll get in trouble for playing this. Right? Maybe I'll change it up. Nah, I can't. You guys know that song, and that's, at the beginning, it has a rake, but I know a lot of you are already commenting below, but Blue, it's not X's in that rake is actually an arpeggio. I think it is, yeah, if you listen closely, he is playing specific notes in that rake. In that case, it's a D major. A lot of people will play it like this, so we've got 11, 10, 10, and then you got to jump with your pinky or third, I suppose, up to that F sharp. So it'd be, that is a very cool rake in that song. In Santana's, what is it? Is it Oyo Como Va or Black Magic Woman? I don't know. What's this one? It goes like that. That's an A minor downwards arpeggio rake. That is a very cool one that he does in that song. So we could call that an arpeggio rake. I don't know, it's just the rake is just really the motion here. It's a bit like strumming, but it's not like strumming quickly through. Well, I mean, it could be. But the idea is that you're dragging your pick more gradually through the arpeggio. The arpeggio just being a small chord that we might hold. So if we go back to my original key of D minor, we could take a little arpeggio like this. This is, just imagine this D minor bar chord. There's the top of it, right? And the other cool thing I really like about this arpeggio shape, one is it's easy to hold. We like that. But also, it fits in the minor pentatonic shape there perfectly. This is shape 4 minor pentatonic, right? It's very similar to the David Gilmour one, actually. But in this case, D minor. We could do any little triad shape. Here's a D minor here, like the Stairway to Heaven chord, I call it, and connect it to whatever note's next, maybe just in pentatonic. In this case, what's D minor pentatonic right here? It's easy shape, right? And that's an up arpeggio, but also we could go a down arpeggio rake, like Santana. That's on the D minor. You can kind of hold all the notes. That's okay. It's not as cool. I like, in the end, what happens is my first finger that's holding those 3 notes of the D minor arpeggio lets go, well, releases pressure, I could say. Once I get down to the root of that chord, this guy, the first finger, just releases pressure so that those notes stop. So that the last one we hear is just that note. I think that is kind of the Santana way to do it. I just think that sounds a little better. On our Patreon this week, we've got a whole bunch of licks that will help you get good at this rake technique. But right now, we've got an up rake. Up meaning down to the floor, right? Up in pitch is what it's doing. Up and bend. And now we've got up and bend connect to scale. And then we've got, what else we have? We had a down one. Like that. We've got arpeggio ones. We could go up an arpeggio. Or down an arpeggio. Just pick an arpeggio shape that you know that you can use on whatever chord at the moment, right? You've got to find something that's on the chord. So if we were in D minor, you might also have a G minor chord at the moment. And you could use a G minor rake arpeggio for that, right? We got up arpeggio rakes, we got down arpeggio rakes, and like I said, a whole bunch of licks that we're going to have on Patreon. So thanks a lot to all our Rockstar Patreons. We really appreciate you. I hope to see you over there. My name is Blue Morris, and I teach guitar lessons on Patreon, on YouTube, and right here in Vancouver. I'll see you soon.